brainwashing. We could argue that brainwashing is as old as time itself. We were brainwashed. I was brainwashed too. Think about the period of when we were growing up. When we were growing up, if we were part of the norm, if we were just the everyday population, someone like me, what do we get told? What happens? What's the first thing that happens? Yeah, the first thing that happens was we start to grow up and we start to get the earliest form of brainwashing, which is, well, what's around us and things like our parents. And the funny thing is that most people's parents are also brainwashed. You know, their brain, same thing as a computer really, has been brainwashed into a certain way of thinking. Types of brainwashing. So everything from the language that we use to the language that we don't use, from things that we are told are right, things that we are told that are wrong, or maybe never told if they are right or wrong at all. And I think this is our earliest form of brainwashing, the language that is going to be used in our everyday lives from henceforth. And then, of course, we're going into the preschools and the nurseries and things like this, and we're programmed by once again language. But now I don't really remember my time in small school when I was a small child like that. I don't think I have any recollection whatsoever. But I have seen in this day and age, and even up to sort of 10 years ago, without children of my own, the kind of brainwashing that does happen. I mean, I've been to China and I have been present, teaching in some small schools before in my life, and over there the brainwashing is implementing English into a very young mind from a very young age. And I do believe that when it comes to language and expanding a language of a child, I think this is positive brainwashing, but now the next wave of the next level, shall we say, the next step of brainwashing was when you go up another level in school. So you go up another level in school, and I myself am British, I'm from Britain, and our brainwashing was a lot of the time through song. So we would go to the assemblies, the large assemblies where there's the up on the projector screens. There would be the lyrics and the verses and the choruses to various Christian songs. From here we had our brainwashing of religion in a sense. Good King Wenceslas. I honestly, now that I'm on camera with myself, I cannot remember all of the songs that we sang as a collective school in these assemblies. Now I cannot remember. The only one of them I remember is Good King Wenceslas once looked out. Maybe you know this one, right? Hopefully you guys in the comments can remind me of some, if you hail from Britain at such an age. But yes, so this was absolutely another form of another level, another stage of the brainwashing process. Whether we think it was or wasn't, it was, especially if we take a look at things like the lyrics that were basically, well, music is magic, isn't it? It imprints things into our brain, whether we think it or not. We'll come more onto that in this video soon. So yeah, this kind of brainwashing we've got, and then we also mix that together with television. So before all the internet and things like this, we had the television, just the mainstream TV, cartoons and things like that. And on the TV, especially when I was a small child, most things, from what I remember, were kind of whitewashed, some things like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, April, the reporter from the Turtles, she was a reporter, white girl. I recently found out that apparently the creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, he designed, when he wrote and designed the Turtles, April was actually black, or mixed race, maybe, brown, after his girlfriend, I believe. And I found this out days ago. I was watching the Turtles that my nephew was watching, for a few minutes, and then I saw April. I was like, did they change April? And then I found out that it's actually, when I was a child, they changed April because they made her white because it was more acceptable, or would bring in more money, or would make it more watchable, or whatever, So even at this sort of age, very small, I was effectively brainwashed. We can think of that in whatever way that we'd like, but it is brainwashing, as harmless or as harmful, or we might think that could be. Effectively, I've been lied to a lot of my life into thinking that April was white, and she wasn't. She was not white. I mean, this is just race, and I'm not really interested in sort of things like race, but it kind of annoys me, that where we get brainwashed, and we're still brainwashing even now. We're changing history, we're changing, canonical characters and things like that some people grew up with, and things like that. And it just goes to show you that the brainwashing, it never ever ever stops. It just goes in line with the agenda at the time, and then it screw everybody else, basically. So this kind of brainwashing, from such a young age, and not to mention all the stimuli that we might get from when mum or dad was watching the news. We'll probably get onto that soon as well, actually. But let's go to the next part of the brainwashing, the next level. So I believe you go to your primary school and things like that, right? And then when we go to primary school, we are introduced to things like, music class, and religious education classes, I believe, right? Physical education classes and things like that, maths class. So this next stage now, we're then led to believe that everything that we do in the school is critical to life, otherwise, why do it, right? We're learning mathematics, we're learning about things like sciences, we're learning religious education and things like that. Now, you don't really question it as such a young child, but you just do it, and this also is brainwashing. Now, whether you think it's good or bad, or healthy or unhealthy brainwashing, I suppose that is subjective. As for my personal opinion, when it comes to brainwashing in things like primary school, if I didn't have to learn about things like God, I certainly wouldn't be interested in learning things to do with God, especially when it comes to praying. It doesn't matter what religion it is, I would want to be brainwashed into being self-empowered, not to be giving my power to something else, I mean, we can say that I don't understand religion because of this. Maybe I don't. Maybe some people say, look inside for God or Allah or whatever. But the way I see it is I believe in the power of the human spirit. I believe in the power of the human mind. And that is what we should give our energy and our power to, not to some higher thing, Anyway, so you've got this kind of brainwashing from primary school. And Then in primary school, you're going on to the kind of the next wave of cartoons. Now, particularly now we're talking about the 90s, okay, in which I was in things like primary school. And when we were in primary school, I think we were getting things like the Flintstones, the Simpsons, Flintstones, Simpsons, things like this, the Jetsons, and things like on Cartoon Network, Dexter's Laboratory and all these kind of things. I think I was in primary school. And these types of brainwashing, all of this brainwashing that comes, on the TV after school, so you're very regimented by now. You know that you are waking up at such and such AM, and you know that you are leaving school at such and such AM. By now, we understand and completely accept as a normality that that's what we have to do, pretty much like a working robot or a soldier, or dare I say it, a slave to the system. Because this is the truth, you see. The system is our real enemy, because this is the real thing that was crafted very carefully a long time ago, that taught us how to behave, what we should do, our routine. Yeah, and it was so regimental that we would, like, for example, waking up at 7 a.m. or whatever, making sure that you go to school at 8 or whatever time it was. I just forget, to be honest. And then, you're getting home at 3-ish p.m. or just after 3-ish p.m. And that is your everyday routine. And going forward in time, this is exactly how the whole 9-to-5 system operates now, isn't it? Where you are up at a certain time, and then you go to work, blah, 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 just like the school, and then you go home, just like what you did when you were in school. So from such an early age, we are completely programmed and brainwashed. Okay, now we fast forward a little bit and we go into secondary school. Now, if you ask me, the way I draw this picture is, this is when you have your first illusion of choice or free will, okay? Because when you go back to the period of time just as you go to move to secondary school, right? Or if you want to say high school, right? Do you remember you had a choice, okay? Now, I believe my choices were, in my particular living area, were Myers Grove, King Edward's School, and something else based on my area code, and this is the first choice, or your first illusion of free will choice. Yeah, you're made to believe that it's your choice, and maybe there's some significance in that. But I would imagine that most of the secondary schools were doing the exact same thing, so programming us to do the exact same thing. And those things would be, so the positive brainwashing would have been how to be organized. So using our homework diaries, this is at 9 a.m., this is at 10 a.m., etc., etc., etc. Now this, you could argue that this is a very, very positive form of brainwashing, and I do agree with that. I think organization is key in life, whichever direction that you're going. But it was still regimented in the form that, this is where you got to be at this time, this is where you have to be at that time, and this is where you have to be at that time. And if you failed to attend or you didn't go, now you were punished, right? You can be punished with, detention, maybe extra homework, maybe, teachers going to your parents, maybe, what do they call those things where they expelled or excluded, where sometimes they they send you away for a certain amount of time, and sometimes they completely cut you out of the school. So this kind of brainwashing, in the terms of the routine, this one I think is probably bad, because it's still the hard wiring, the hard coding, to keep you as one of those workers, one of those working robots. You go through your day and then you finish this at this time. It's training you to be part of the masses, training you to stay in the system. One thing that I think can be a positive brainwashing, though, is the brainwashing of consequence. I am a believer that as people we do need to know that there are consequences for things that we do and things that we do not do. You cannot go through life and do something bad or fail to do something you're supposed to do and then not have any punishment or have no repercussions from it. I think that's ridiculous, and I think that stops us from learning and stops us from growing. Should that have no limits? Absolutely not. But I do think that is probably one thing that we used to get right, which, from what I understand these days, is that's not as present anymore. Anyway, so you're in secondary school, and then you are going towards coming home from school, right? Now, one of the greatest things about when I was in high school, secondary school, was we were usually outside playing football or playing sports or just hanging out with our friends. Sometimes getting up to no good, sometimes being just kids, and then so at that period in time, if you're doing that as kids, you don't have much brainwashing going on by the system itself. More so, you've got your social growth, where you're just around friends and you're doing whatever you do. This is where you're the most free, I believe. But the TV and even things like video games and movies and stuff, these were all governmental control and brainwashing. Let's go back to when I was in secondary school, and I do think we had certain, once again, positive brainwashing and stuff, and negative. When I was growing up in secondary school, we had things like American Pie, right, where it was instilled in us and pushed into us by movies like this, and TV shows and things, that it was cool to sleep with a girl and maybe not call her back, to be with as many girls, and that was cool. You were some sort of player. To sleep with a girl before you left college or before you left high school or whatever. If you didn't do that, maybe as a guy anyway, you were gay, or you don't like girls, or you're a pussy. Something along these lines. This kind of stuff was really pushed, whether it was through humor in TV or films, whether it was through peer pressure that we see in the films and things like this, or whether it was drilled on a daily as part of a TV series that was prolonged, and this really bled into society. So this bled into our friendships, because as we all watched and consumed things like this, when it came to us hanging out outside after school and things like that, this brainwashing was already there. So then we effectively brainwashed one another, at one point, I remember in my life, I was the only one who was a virgin. Okay? And being a virgin was considered, oh, he must be gay, or, that's sad. Why has he not had sex? Blah, blah, blah. And this comes from your own friends or your social circle, and how bad is that? You don't want to sleep with someone randomly, so you're made fun of, or you're even bullied, or made to feel like something that you're not. And that is the power of brainwashing and things like media. Very, very powerful stuff. Go back to things like your cartoons, right? Go to things like cartoons. We had things like, do you remember Johnny Bravo? Yeah, this came on the TV. This guy was a utter creep, always basically sexually harassing or sexually abusing women, and we considered it, because it was on mainstream TV in a cartoon and he got punched for it and things like that, we considered it funny. Now, I don't know how girls observed this program. I've never actually asked a girl about what she thought of Johnny Bravo. But as guys, we thought it was hilarious, and I saw certain people in my secondary school who would basically imitate Johnny Bravo, but he would get away with it, and they would get away with it and feel these girls, and things like this, and they're just copying what they see on TV, because they think it's funny, or they've developed something from watching this kind of thing, something that happens obviously when you're a teenager and you're a boy. But that is just one example that probably of bad, negative brainwashing. I believe positive brainwashing. I do believe that things like Dragon Ball was positive brainwashing, not in terms of the violence, but in terms of the values. Learning the martial arts, for example, pushing yourself beyond your limits, however this can be translated. I guess sometimes you could say that's in the eye of the beholder, if you like. Maybe some people translate it differently. Now, Dragon Ball is another story. There was some things in there that are a little bit questionable for kids to consume. But I do believe on the surface, Dragon Ball Z was quite positive. We go back to Pokemon. Okay, Pokemon now. This is a big one, in my opinion. Now, I grew up watching Pokemon every single day after school, right? Because I was pretty young when it began. And what you failed to see as a kid, maybe even as an adult now, of the brainwashing is basically, think about it. Kids or people take a Pokemon, so an animal, in a Pokeball that's like a jail or a cage, which is very small, and yeah, you can argue maybe there's a pocket dimension inside the Pokeball, whatever, right? But still, they're taken against their will to be trained. And then the kid or the adult, or whoever it is, goes out into the wild, physically assaults or abuses another animal, i.e. Pokemon, to take it against its will and then force it into a capsule for the rest of its life in order to domesticate it or train it or teach it how to fight or get it further abused. And I don't know what kind of brainwashing that is. Maybe somebody else can enlighten me on that, but that's basically saying that, doing that is okay. It's cool, it's fun, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and then I'm not sure we can get started on The Simpsons. You don't need to know about The Simpsons. Everyone sees The Simpsons. The Simpsons is definitely brainwashing. But the bottom line is, most things that we consumed was a form of brainwashing, and especially the news. Oh my gosh, the news in Britain. We'll get onto that again shortly. Now let's fast forward now. So you're going to finish school. Yeah, you're going to finish school, and you're coming towards leaving high school or secondary school, and you have choices, remember? Now the choices, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, but your choices were college. If you happen to have good enough grades, you could go straight to uni, or you go out and work, or you do nothing. Right? Now, I'm not talking about today's day and age, because today's day and age there are different paths because of things like the internet, right? But back then, before the internet was widespread and things like this, we're talking the early 2000s. Those were your choices. College if the grades weren't so good, university, go out and work or do nothing. Now, the brainwashing came when it was brainwashed into us that we needed these high grades in school, like A-levels, etc., in order to be able to go to university. So effectively, the brainwashing there is, all right, if you are stupid, you didn't get enough grades, if you are not smart enough, you can't go to university. No matter what your personal skills or talents or traits were, if those grades were not high enough, you couldn't be considered eligible to go to university. And the brainwashing was, if you didn't have a degree when you got out there in real life, your life was going to shit, basically. The brainwashing was, you get a crappy job with really crappy pay, and you'd be part of the rat race, and your salary would never be this high, blah, 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 blah. So it's drilled and punched and knocked into you all this time as you're growing up that the goal is to go to university so you can get a good job, so that you stay in the educational monster, the educational system. Keep feeding back into that. Keep brainwashing yourself. This is what I need to do. This is what I'm told to do. This is what I'm apparently good at. And this is what I will continue to do for the rest of my life. So those were our basic choices. And whichever way that you go, you are still effectively feeding the governmental system. So you go to school, you're in your regiment, okay? And then if your grades are not high enough, cool, you can go and fix it in college, okay? That's probably going to cost you some money. Education costs you money. Secondary education costs you money. Or you go to university. You get a loan. Student loan, or if your parents are rich enough, most of us were not, you pay for the university. So you're not in debt later. And when you do go to work, you're taxed, aren't you? Yeah? You're taxed from the government crazy amounts of money, especially in Britain where it keeps going up and up and up and up and up. Okay? And nothing really seems to improve. But you're in the system because that's what you think life is. We think that that's what we're supposed to do. We are just supposed to go to school and get a job. Whether that's get a job after university, or whether that's get a job after college, or whether that's get a job after school. That's what we're taught to do. We are effectively brainwashed from a childlike age, you could basically say from birth, to feed into the system. The matrix, if you like. Yeah? We're so hopelessly dependent on this system that we're afraid to go out of it. We're afraid to step out of it. We're afraid to do something different, And what happens as a result of that? We are not thanked, are we? Instead, we're given this, aren't we? Where the money that people earn is taxed higher and higher all the time. And then there's new things coming out all the time, just to make sure that everyone is scared enough to stay in the system and keep paying into it. And then the brainwashing continues, because then we started to get all this media, such as online media and social media and things like that. And then the governments and stuff, they started to lose some control, but you had governments and things like that pushing agendas in social media this time. Brainwashing in social media, fake news, snippets of news that are spread here and there. You see one part of a story, not the whole part of the story. It's like when you go back to watching the news, even when you watch the news right now, especially in Britain, it's mostly negative, okay? It's barely ever positive. It's mostly negative, and it's talking about, I don't know, at the moment they're banging on about, illegal migration and the boats coming over and, digital IDs. It's just, what do we call it? The brainwashing is it's like a form of fear mongering. Yeah, digital ID. and it's going to do this, and it's going to do that, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. You know, people coming across on boats who shouldn't be here. It's fear-mongering too. You know, not actually checking people's credentials when they are coming into the country illegally. You know, again, it's fear-mongering, isn't it? Because, to be honest, the public should not know, should they, if people are coming over illegally. Think about this. If you are a leader of a country and it's your job to keep those borders secure, and you either cannot or you do not stop that from happening, and people flood in, think about it. Would you want your people to know about that? You probably wouldn't, would you? Because they would be scared. Unless, of course, that's the kind of brainwashing that is on your agenda. You want people to be scared. You want people to live in fear. Because the people that live scared or in fear, or even the people that are confused, they are the ones that are the easiest to control. And we've done this for a long time, ever since feudalism and before. You know, we have controlled through fear or through love. And it's usually fear that makes people more malleable, you know. And you know, back then we would see it with you've got to go to work to earn your money, so that you can put food on the table. That, by the way, will always increase the price it costs you, so you can pay for the house. By the way, that will always keep increasing tax for, to get a mortgage, which, by the way, doesn't really mean that it's always going to be yours because you weren't brainy enough to own the land. You know what I mean? It's the brainwashing never, ever, ever stops. And it's always to make sure that they can push their agenda. Yeah, it's always to make sure that they can tighten control and control more and squeeze more out of you. It's whatever the cost. Brainwashing. It's been around, and for all this time, we live in a matrix. Your brain is a computer. It's brainwashed, it's programmed. Yeah? And the only way that we can get salvation is by breaking free of this matrix. Okay? It's getting out of it, whatever you want to call it. Unplugging yourself, waking up, having an awakening, whatever you want to call it. That realistically is the only way out, and to self-empower yourself. Because if we don't realize that we are brainwashed, if we just continue and continue and continue, then the brainwashing continues. So this fear-mongering works. And when you're presented with a solution to a problem, which, by the way, was not there before, okay, these establishments, these governmental bodies, and people probably behind these governmental bodies, they create these problems out of nothing. Okay? The brainwashing, you're so brainwashed that you're doing what they want anyway. Okay? When the agenda changes, they brainwash in a slightly different way. Because what they do is they create a problem that was not there before. And then, when that problem is so problematic, they will offer a solution. Does it sound familiar? It should sound familiar, because that's what's happening right now, globally, with digital ID. In Britain, here, they say, digital ID will stop the illegal immigration, because then people won't be able to work without this digital ID. Then you got to ask yourself questions, haven't you? Well, if people are coming here illegally, why would they have digital ID when they don't even have a phone or a passport? So are we giving them a phone as well? To enter illegally? So I guess one of the reasons I did this video is because it would be nice to start to see people waking up. Okay? And not be brainwashed by governments that are trying to completely suppress a nation and to completely just fearmonger them so that and confuse them to such a state that they do whatever the government tells them to do, and just nod their head and go along with it, because we don't have to do that, and we shouldn't accept whatever is pushed upon us like that. We should not accept things like this digital ID. We should not do that. This is not okay.